Shaggy está celebrando los 20 años de uno de los álbumes más importantes del dancehall moderno de todos los tiempos. En este nuevo episodio, Shaggy nos cuenta sobre la reedición de Hot Shot, la importancia del álbum para arrancar un nuevo milenio, la vida en Jamaica durante la pandemia, la influencia que ha tenido sobre la música actual y, por supuesto, el movimiento Black Lives Matter, del cual el artista tiene posiciones bastante claras. Esta es una conversación con un exponente masivo de la historia de la música de Jamaica y solo sucede aquí. Es Shaggy en el podcast por Canal 13. Sir, I must say, I'm doing all right. How about yourself?
It's been a crazy morning. I've been up early and running around, and here I am now. So,
what you been up to this morning? Tell me.
I did some press this morning, and I went and had a early meeting, and then was trying to head back in time to get the other set of press would be this one, but I ran in a little late.
Listen, I must say you're looking mighty good, man. Look at that.
Thank you very much. Well, it's Jamaica, and because we're in COVID, you kind of have to try to make the best of life at this point, so that's the whole drama of it. Yeah. So what can we do?
Tell me a bit about life in Jamaica during this COVID times. How's the country holding up?
I have to really give a lot of props to the government of Jamaica for the fact that I think they've done an incredible job of flattening the curve. Funny enough, when I got here, I think they jumped in really early. They implemented, social distancing, curfews. It's mandatory by law to wear a mask in public, and you're checked not just by the authorities, but by people also, regular citizens. And I think that is really, really good. And it is, you have seen where that has paid off for us. We don't have as much cases as everywhere else. And everybody is really taking it as now a part of the culture, just part of everyday life, wearing masks and all that.
I'm so definitely glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that everything is going well. It's not going so well in other parts of the world, so it's definitely a relief to know that Jamaica is doing safe within, the crazy moment that we're living in right now,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So we're here to talk about Hot Shot, and I can't, stress this enough. I can't emphasize the importance of Hot Shot enough. So I guess I would begin with saying that many of the things that have happened over the course of 2 or 3 years in terms of the expansion of culture in the U.S., of Jamaican culture, of dancehall culture, wouldn't have been possible if it weren't for you and for that album.
Yeah, I think, the thing about Hot Shot is a very monumental album for the genre. It was definitely the album that brought numbers to the game and brought the genre onto many mainstream platform and really gave us a seat at the table. And so when I was asked to really do a commemorative, kind of a re-release of a remaster, I was like, I agreed with it because it was monumental, but I didn't want to do it track for track because those classics are already there. They were still so recurrent on radio. A lot of kids were still, doing TikToks to them and all of that. So I wanted these kids to experience what we experienced in 2000, but in their vibe. So I solicited some young producers and started to experiment with trap and reggaeton and Afro beats and hip hop. And I really liked how they sound. I did it to the 5 most streamed tracks on the album, which is Angel, It Wasn't Me, Love Me, Love Me, Keeping It Real, and Hot Shot. And I took the same concept to some of my older tracks, Mr. Boombastic, Old Carolina, Strength of a Woman, and Hey Sexy Lady. and just created with about 5 new songs, one with me and Sting called Primavera, and did over such classic as Buckingham Palace and Electric Avenue. And of course, he threw Banana on there, and it now became a journey of Shaggy through dancehall. And because a lot of, as much as you say dancehall was very important to the genre, some of those other songs were very important to the genre. Songs like "Oh Carolina" was the first #1 song, dancehall song was the first #1 dancehall song in the British chart. You know, first song to go #1 in the British chart as a dancehall song. And then we debuted at #1 with Mr. Boombastic afterwards, the first time in reggae or dancehall that any reggae or dancehall record debuted at #1. We did it twice after that with Angel and Wasn't Me, and of course with Hot Shot. You know, and of course there was Summertime and some of these other songs that were really instrumental in moving the genre forward.
I remember "Oh Carolina" in a soundtrack of a movie. I remember
Sliver.
it being.
Yeah, Sliver. It was Sliver,
yeah.
The movie Sliver. Yeah, with Sharon Stone. It was a big move for us at that time. Good luck.
Back in those days, take me back to that moment where you were pushing this culture forward into the mainstream, how hard it was or how easy it was for you and what you remember dearly about those times.
You know, somebody asked me something similar to that the other day, and I said, a lot of those early days were like a blur to me, especially Hot Shot, because we were going so fast and I was so young. I am more enjoying success now because I get to soak it in because I'm older and I'm not as everything, you know, you get to process things a little bit better at this age. It was incredibly hard in those days, and I was incredibly naive at the time, and I took a lot of things for granted. I think I took the fact that I got "Oh Carolina" at #1, and I followed up with "Boombastic," which was another #1, and I took those things for granted because I think that, okay, I could do this. I took winning the first Grammy on Boombastic for granted also because I figured, hey, I'm just that good. But then I quickly came to realize how hard it was because it wasn't a level playing field. You know, with dancehall, there was no radio station that supported dancehall. Dancehall as a genre itself wasn't recognized by the mainstream at that point. So even though I was making these really huge leaps and taking it for granted, I didn't realize how monumental they were. I was just a kid making records. I think it was after Hot Shot, then I started to realize, and just, you know, the trials and tribulation. I got dropped from Virgin, you know, after Midnight Lover album, and luckily caught a break with Love Me on How Stella Got Her Groove Back. That prompted another bidding war for me again. And it made you start to appreciate it. So it's been very, very hard. And Hot Shot was what made it open up a little easier to where we could get the likes of a Sean Paul to come in and help carry the load a bit, you know what I mean? And Charlie Blacks and a couple of these other guys, Egyptian and these guys to help us. You know, there were other guys like in my early days, like, you know, Shabba Ranks and Supercat, and they were facing a lot of, you know, struggles at the time also, to help to put it. And it's crazy because now the art form has now produced, you know, other offspring such as reggaeton and influence like Afrobeat and hip hop, you know, but yet still dancehall is still the lowest streaming of all those genres. And, you know, that's something that bothers me a bit.
That's incredible because I remember Murder, She Wrote being rotated alongside "Oh Carolina" and all those other big songs on MTV, and not being, you know, in terms of the rotation that they got, not being representative enough of the richness and the importance of the culture, and not only of the importance that it had right then and there, but of what it was going to have. Because it's like when you look at the history of dancehall and what you've done with this record, with this album, for culture globally, is very difficult to measure. You know, it's hard.
It is hard to measure, and you you just spoke of Sly and Robbie with Murder, She Wrote. These guys are instrumental in the building of not just dancehall, but the pillars of reggae also, And, I certainly have had a lot of help and still have a lot of help, but for the most part, we've still been in that position of trailblazing, even up until this day. And, it's me just trying to maneuver through my own boredom because I'm allergic to boredom and try and find things to keep myself excited. And if I'm excited, I figure that the audience will be excited.
When you talk about trailblazing, I want to ask you, and this may be a lesson for young artists to learn from someone such as yourself, what it feels like to be a trailblazer at the beginning of that trail, because I feel that it's very lonely to leading, especially when it comes to music. And nowadays, young people, young artists get tired really quickly of fighting the good fight, of putting those records out there, of, shutting the noise from around yourself in order to achieve what you're destined to do. People get tired, they get fed up really quickly. And I know it wasn't easy for you. So as a trailblazer, let's talk about that experience as a pioneer and a leader.
And it was a tough move. A lot of these guys have it very easy these days because everything is so viral and everything is within social media and everything is on your little device. To promote, you just press it and go. To have conversation with you and I, back in the days, I'd have to be where you are. I'd have to be traveling on different continents to actually promote a record and get the word out. Now you could do it on your device, and I could understand why artists would be a little fed up and be like, oh my God, it's a lot to be done. We get criticized sometimes by purists. When we came to Old Carolina, we were criticized by reggae purists and saying that, we didn't do pure dancehall, and I didn't do pure dancehall. What I did was a hybrid dancehall, because really it's 7 notes: do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. We're not inventing the wheel here. You know what I'm saying? And there was also another artist that I was in the same company as, that was labeled as not doing pure music, and that was Bob Marley. It's well documented that by Chris Blackwell, even on YouTube, that Bob Marley took the Wailers music, and Chris Blackwell and Bob Marley hired session musicians from all over the world to play overdubs on these Wailers composition that then became, ironically, pure reggae. So I think a hybrid is always great. I always go back to Sting telling me a story that he tried to emulate what Steel Pulse and Bob Marley did, especially with the bass with the Police, and ended up creating what was a hybrid sound that ended up being the sound of the Police. And that was, the first set of reggae music that was accepted on radio, and got played. So, a hybrid is always the way to go to move the culture. If you're just repeating what your forefathers have done, then you're not really moving the culture forward. You're just trying to repeat what they've done, and how could I do better than what the guys that have come before me do? What am I going to tell you? I made better reggae music than Bob Marley, or better reggae music than Dennis Brown, or better reggae music than Peter Tosh? No, these guys were gods at what they
did. And you get stuck. It's funny because when you respect the trade, now I'm not saying you don't respect the trade, that you don't respect the culture, but when you don't try and go further, you get stuck. And I think that's one of the reasons why genres die out,
Absolutely. And if you're not trying to come with new vibe and new energy and do things to make the music grow and make the culture grow, then you're not really doing your job.
Let's talk about the arrangements around Hot Shot 2020 and how you say you wanted to do something different with this bunch of songs which have been classic, and how risky that was, or how you enjoyed it, how joyful it was. Take me through the process of picking those songs and kind of elaborating a new sound for them, or just reworking them in different manners.
It wasn't very hard doing it. I think once I started it, I was like, okay, I really liked how they sounded. I guess going into it I was a little apprehensive and like, okay, am I really going to do this? But everything about it just made sense. It made sense for the growth of the music. It makes sense of the generations that was listening. And let's face it, all the people who like the original ones, you're not missing anything. They're still available on all streaming platforms, so you can still get it. But this was just for a new set of people that are coming out, and then you wanted them to enjoy it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's amazing. Take me through the experience of working with Sting, which you've mentioned a couple times because of the influence that it had on reggae culture once they started making music with the Police back in the 70s, and you got together for an album and a tour that actually made it to Colombia before COVID. And I was there, we had a blast listening to you guys perform.
Yeah, it's always fun with Sting, man. Sting is the brother I didn't know I needed, and he was the voice that brought me to another level. And he made me feel like Superman. He made me feel like I could do things that other people around me were saying that was out of my reach. And he gave me a certain amount of validation. And, he taught me to push the boundaries even more than I used to. And taught me not to worry about what anybody else thinks. He's one of my favorite people to be around. He is, I would rather be on tour with Sting than be on tour by myself. It's that much fun, I would rather be making music with Sting than be making music by myself. That is how it is with him. Yeah, it's just a friendship that's click, a vibe that click, and I was just like, oh my, this is incredible.
Are you guys getting back together for anything else other than this rework that he's done on Hot Shot 2020?
We're always making music. we're always doing stuff, So I know he's got to go in right now and make a new record, so that's cool. But yeah, from time to time, we always collaborate. So it's just a matter of what we're gonna put out or when we put it out, or whatever,
I have a question regarding the influence of reggae music and dancehall music on British audiences, and how those audiences were a little more prone to the culture than American audiences. Because once again, and as we started this conversation, I think you were a pioneer and a trailblazer in making that music available and accessible for American audiences, which have always been a bit harder to reach. Mm-hmm. Why do you think that happened?
I don't know. I mean, you're definitely right that it's harder to reach the mainstream America. In certain areas where you have a heavy, communities of color and Caribbean culture, you might get records played on urban stations, but to get on really mainstream pop station, it was always a push, a hard sell. And I was one of the few that actually got on pop radio as a black act. Of course there were UB40 and other people that have done it, and Sting and the Police, of course. But as a black act, I was probably one of the first black act to get pop radio, or black reggae act at that too. So it's been always harder. In the UK, there were a lot of people that did it before me that got on radio, and I think it's, Jamaica comes in from the British culture within itself, from colonial days, and so they're a little bit more open to the Caribbean culture, because there's a lot more Caribbean people that were in England and these places before they were ever into America. And I think Jamaicans and reggae music had it already established its coolness within the British culture from earlier on. And so it made it cool. And then you had people like the Rolling Stones who, you know, Keith Richards and them were always in Jamaica. You know, you had a lot of course, the Police, a lot of these British rock bands, you know, were pulling from the culture of Jamaica. And of course, Chris Blackwell is a big part of it, even with U2 and, you know, of course, Grace Jones and a lot of these people and Sly and Robbie were pioneers in feeding that coolness to the British culture.
I want to go back to the word urban. You mentioned urban radio, and there's a controversy that arose at the beginning of the year, and I think it was, you know, a little bit earlier it was later in 2019, where people in the UK started talking about banning the word urban to define these expressions for radio purposes or promotion purposes. And I'd like to know what your take is on getting the word urban out of the conversation and moving forward with another definition or another term.
You know, we could sit here and argue about removing titles, but are we really going to remove the problem? You know, that's the main question. You know, it was categorized as urban because it played black music. And they said black music were from the blacks were really from the inner cities. And that was an urban, as they labeled it, you know, an urban representation. You know, I'm cool with getting rid of the titles if they're going to fix the problem, you know, and let black acts also get played on other format, on pop radio. You know, are we going to sit there and change it to black radio? Because a lot of people call urban radio black radio, you know? Or are we just going to say all radio and erase all the genres? These are debatable questions, you know, that conversations need to be had on them. Because the problem does lie, it shouldn't have taken this long for an urban dancehall act or a black dancehall act to break into the pop charts and break into pop radio, you know? And so, you know, discrimination and racism has been a part of the fabric of culture and of our lives over the years. You know, let's look at reggae pop bands. Any band that has sold over 10 million. Let's start there. That in reggae. UB40, white. The Police, white. Ace of Base, white. Even now, the biggest reggae band is a band called Revolution out of California, white. Arguably so, the greatest reggae artist of all time, Bob Marley. Only number one he's ever had was a song called I Shot the Sheriff. It's the only pop song sang by the white guy,
Eric Clapton.
So it's not, you cannot sit there and ignore it, you know? They say there are 3 top streamers in dancehall and reggae right now. It's Shaggy, Bob Marley, and Sean Paul. It's not coincidence that those 3 guys are 3 half white guys. You know, so there's a lot to be debated, a lot to talk about, and let's start having the conversation about them, because it's only through conversation that we're gonna ignite change, you know? And so if you're going to remove the title, you got to talk about removing the problem.
Nile Rodgers told me a couple weeks back, we had a conversation about the Black Lives Matter movement, and he reflected upon his role in the civil rights movement through disco music, which was something that really amazed me, because I always thought, from my Latino standpoint and from what I've learned back in high school, that the civil rights movement was a movement when it came to musical terms where only like the funk and soul brothers took it upon themselves to push the culture forward. Sam Cooke, James Brown, Marvin Gaye. But then here's Nile Rodgers telling me about the end of the Vietnam War and the beginning of a different kind of movement that was based on dance, and how important that was to get that conversation forward and move it alongside a whole bunch of other stuff like women's rights and gay rights and things like that. And how it, at the same time, I was thinking, as he spoke about this, how he changed the world through music by just making great music that nobody could control themselves and dance to the music. And I think that's also a part of activism through music, which is what I believe that what you've done, with songs that cross over to the mainstream and take over what white people did with Black culture at a moment, and you kind of repossess. Do you feel that like that's a little bit of a little bit of a revenge for everything that has happened, cultural appropriation, racism, discrimination?
Every Black act is doing protest music in some form. Every Black act is an activist. Period. You don't have to sit down there and be speaking about the subject matter. Even if you sing "Baby, Baby, Ooh, Baby, I Love You" as a Black act and getting it to #1, that's activism. Michael Jackson, though he was singing Billie Jean and Beat It, it was an act of activism, and he was protesting. He was pushing the barriers to get on MTV that only played white videos, and breaking barriers. So there's not a Black act that's around that is not, playing their part in being an activist. It's activism, period. If you're doing Black music, I've done it for reggae. I've done it as a Black man doing reggae. It's just simple as that. There's some who would sit down and says, well, the really true activist is Bob Marley, and the really true activist is James Brown, or people who have done music with activism lyrics in it, and subject matter. But I don't think it's just them alone. I think Lionel Richie singing "Once, Twice, Three Time a Lady" was being an activist, because he broke through, to be getting positions that only white acts did. And if you really sit down and think about it, let's think about it for a second. All the Black acts that have achieved the level of most white acts have done it by being at genius level. Think about what I'm saying. The acts that are Black acts that are in the same pay grade as your big white acts are of genius level. Stevie Wonder, Prince, Michael Jackson, James Brown. And even James Brown didn't get to that dollar figure of mainstream. Bob Marley would have had he lived longer. But you think about all these people that I'm calling, Lionel Richie, that these guys get top dollar. Whitney Houston, when she was alive. Think of the black acts that have gotten the top dollar, whether it be for show, royalties, deal. Ray Charles. They're all at genius level. Jay-Z, Beyonce, genius level. And they're acts that are white acts that have not put out the amount of work, have the amount of success, broken the amount of barriers, and make twice that they do to this day. Just process that for a bit. And that's what racism is. And that's that's always been going on. So every black act is an activist.
I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to me, and I want to celebrate your career, your music, your songs, your company alongside Sting, and a beautiful 20 years of Hot Shot. I think it's an amazing piece of work, and that you've, as I said at the very beginning, you've set trail, and you've made things possible for this conversation to actually get better, to get healthier, and to get more musically inspiring,
Yes, well, thank you very much. I really do appreciate it. And not just from me, but my culture and my genre also appreciates it.
I have one last question, and is what's in your what's in the piano? What's the tablature that you have in the piano? Is there a particular song there?
No, you know what? My daughter plays. I have a 15-year-old daughter, and she's been playing since she was 6 years old. And I have twin daughters also, so they're playing. And I think this one is Bubble Boogie. So it's my little daughters that come up, and they play way better than I will ever play. And that's Flying Down to Rio. And there are also some Jamaican music, folk songs that they sometimes come and play with here. So, thank God when I bought the piano, they ended up learning. I ping pang around and just kind of work with the melodies off, but I don't play as well as they do.
Hey, many blessings to the family, to the twins, to the kids, and many blessings to you. Thank you once again for being on the podcast. It's been an honor.
Thank you. Sorry for being late, my brother. Thank you very much.
That's okay. Take care. Good afternoon.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye.